They said it with a laugh. "It's just a joke, Grandma." As if that made it better. As if my house turned upside down, my floor sticky with beer and God knows what else, the sharp chemical smell coming from the guest room, and 5 strangers passed out in the den. As if all of that was funny. At 78, I've seen too much to be shocked. But I wasn't prepared for this kind of humiliation in my own home. And I certainly wasn't ready for the knock on the door at 2 in the morning. It started with music, not loud at first, a slow pulse of bass coming from downstairs. I thought I'd dreamed it. But then the laughter came. High, shrieking, young laughter, the kind that fills a room and doesn't care who's listening. I sat up in bed, reached for my glasses, and realized 2 things at once. The music wasn't in my head, and I wasn't alone in the house. I came downstairs in my robe and slippers, already knowing who I'd find. Bella, my granddaughter. 19, restless, and perpetually between jobs. She'd asked to stay just a few nights 2 weeks ago. I should have said no. But when your own blood stands on the porch with her suitcase and a tearful story about her awful roommates, you don't think. You open the door. You make up the guest bed. You make soup. That's what grandmothers do. Only now, my guest room door was wide open, and the air inside smelled burnt. Not like cooking. Sharper. Chemical. I didn't go in. I turned the corner to the living room, and there they were. Bella, sprawled on the couch with a plastic cup in one hand and someone else's jacket on her lap. A boy with green hair dancing alone in front of the window. 2 girls giggling over a phone on the floor. Bottles everywhere. My ceramic lamp knocked over and broken. And in the middle of it all, Bella waved at me like I was a houseplant that had started speaking. "Grandma, you're up. We were trying to be quiet." "Turn it off," I said. My voice sounded thin. "Chill," she smiled, standing up and swaying slightly. "It's just a joke, Grandma. We're celebrating." I don't know what made me angrier. The word joke, or the way she said grandma like it meant nothing. I stood there in my own living room, wearing the robe I'd mended 3 times, looking at the chaos and realizing I had no control. None. "This is my home," I said. Bella rolled her eyes. "You told me I could have a few friends over." "A few friends?" I pointed to the kitchen, where someone I didn't recognize was lying on the floor with their shoes off. "You said 2 people. It's past midnight." "That's not illegal." "I didn't say it was. I said it's my house." And that's when the doorbell rang. Not a ding-dong, a heavy, deliberate knock. Once, twice, then again. Everyone froze. Even the music stopped. Bella looked at me, then at the door, her face changing. "I swear, if you called the cops—" "I didn't call anyone," I said. "But maybe someone else did." From the front window, I could see the blue and red reflection flashing against the neighbor's car. Bella cursed and stumbled toward the door. "Don't say anything," she hissed over her shoulder. "Let me handle this." I didn't move. I just watched as she opened the door and tried to smile. "Officers. Hi." I couldn't hear what they said at first, but I saw their faces. One of them was young, barely older than Bella, but he didn't smile back. The other looked older, tired. Both stepped inside. "Whose house is this?" the older officer asked. Bella gestured back at me. "My grandma's." "Can we speak with her?" She hesitated, then turned toward me. "Grandma, they just want to ask you something. Be cool, okay?" I stepped forward, heart thudding. "Ma'am, we've received a noise complaint. Neighbors also mentioned possible illegal substances being used." "Do you know these individuals?" I looked at them, the strangers, the mess, the beer-soaked rug, and Bella, standing there like she expected me to lie for her. "They're my granddaughter's friends," I said. "They weren't invited." Bella's head snapped toward me. "Grandma? She told me she'd have 2 people over. I didn't know about this." The younger officer nodded. "We'll need to ask everyone to leave, and we may need to search the premises if there's cause." Bella's voice went shrill. "You can't just search my grandma's house." "Actually," the older one said, "if we suspect illegal activity, we can. And ma'am," he looked at me kindly, "if you didn't invite them, you're within your rights to ask us to proceed." I should have said no. I should have protected her like always. That's what I'd done when she crashed her car last summer, when she stole money from my purse and swore it was a mistake, when her father, my son, said she was just having a rough year. But I didn't. I looked at the broken lamp, at the stain on the rug, at the strangers in my home. Then I looked at Bella. "You can proceed," I said, and for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel weak, just cold. And clear. The officers asked everyone to sit down. One of the girls protested, said she had rights, that they couldn't hold her here without a lawyer. The younger officer, Daniels, I think his name was, replied evenly, "No one's under arrest yet, but you're not leaving either." Yet. That word did something to Bella. I saw her shoulders tense, her mouth twist like she was about to cry. But nothing came out. She just sat back on the couch, arms crossed tight across her chest, chewing the inside of her cheek like a kid caught cheating on a test. They took statements one by one, names, ages, whether they lived here. I watched from the hallway, arms folded, not interfering, not helping, just standing. Daniels came over eventually, soft-voiced, not unkind. "Ma'am, you okay to answer a few questions?" I nodded. We sat at the kitchen table. The chairs still smelled faintly of polish. I'd cleaned earlier that day, wiped down every surface, even folded new towels for Bella's bathroom. Like a fool. "Can you tell me how many people your granddaughter invited over?" She said 2. "This isn't the first time she's pushed the line, but this..." I gestured toward the noise still coming from the living room. "I didn't agree to a party. Were you aware of any substances in the house? Alcohol, marijuana, anything else?" I shook my head. "Not until tonight." "Has your granddaughter done this before?" I hesitated. "She stayed here a few times, never like this, but there have been things. Missing money. Broken rules." Daniels jotted something down, nodded once. "You're not in trouble, ma'am. But we may need to bring her in for questioning depending on what we find." My stomach knotted. Even after everything, a part of me still wanted to shield her. Still saw the little girl who used to braid dandelions into my garden gloves, but that part of me was shrinking fast. In the living room, the other officer, Mathis, was opening a black duffel bag they'd found behind the couch. From where I stood, I could see little plastic baggies inside. I didn't ask what it was. I didn't need to. Bella saw it too. "That's not mine," she blurted. "I don't know whose that is." "Ma'am," Mathis said, "this was behind the couch you've been sitting on all evening. I didn't put it there." The girl with the phone, skinny, freckles, maybe 17, spoke up. "I saw her with it earlier." "You lying!" Bella lunged toward her, but Daniels caught her arm. "That's enough," he said firmly. "You're all going to be taken in for statements. If there's nothing to charge, you'll be released." "But I live here," Bella protested, turning toward me. "Grandma, tell them. I live here." "You're staying here," I corrected, voice even. You don't live here. And I didn't give you permission for any of this. The words landed like slaps. She blinked at me. You're really going to do this to me? I didn't answer. What could I say that I hadn't said 100 times in softer ways? That I was tired? That I couldn't keep covering for her mistakes? That at some point, what you enable becomes what you deserve? They lined up the kids in the entryway, one by one, to take them out. Daniels stayed behind a moment, handed me a card. If you need to make a statement later or follow up on anything, call that number. And, ma'am, he paused, you did the right thing. I nodded. Didn't thank him. Just stood there while the door closed behind them. The silence after they left was the worst part. Not because I missed the noise, God no, but because that silence was filled with every moment I'd let slide. Every, she's just young. Every, she'll grow out of it. Every, she means well. I went upstairs, changed out of my robe, put on an old sweater, and came back down. The living room smelled like sweat and spilled liquor. I opened the windows, took out the trash, threw away the cups, the wrappers, the napkins someone had used to blot lipstick and left on the mantel. I worked steadily, mechanically, like scrubbing away the night would reset something. At 3:15, the phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again at 3:20. I picked up. Grandma? Bella's voice, hoarse. They're not charging me yet. They said I might be released in the morning. Can you come? I said nothing. Please, she whispered. I didn't know there was stuff in that bag. It wasn't mine. You know I'd never. I'm tired, Bella. Just come down, talk to them, tell them I'm not. I hung up. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. I didn't answer. Instead, I went to the drawer by the stairs, the one where I kept envelopes, the one where 2 weeks ago I'd tucked in $100 just in case she needed something. I pulled it out. Still there. I put the envelope on the table, looked at it. Then I tore it in half, and then again, and again, until it was nothing but scraps. At 4:30, the house was clean. Not perfect. The stain on the rug would take more effort, but clean. I made tea, sat at the kitchen table, looked at the quiet hallway. Then I took out my notebook, the one I used to write grocery lists and notes for the garden. And on the first fresh page, I wrote, October 12th. I finally stopped making excuses. By mid-morning, the silence in the house had turned from relief into something heavier. Not regret, not exactly, but something that pressed in from the walls, like the air was waiting for me to change my mind. I didn't. The call came at 9:42. A number I didn't recognize. I let it ring until voicemail picked up, then immediately regretted it. What if it was the officer or the station? I checked the message. This is Officer Mathis from Somerville PD, calling on behalf of Ms. Bella Millard. She's been released into our care but has no transportation arranged. If you could contact us or pick her up within the next hour, we'd appreciate it. I sat back in the chair and stared at the cracked ceiling. I could already see the way this was supposed to go. I'd show up. She'd come out with wet eyes and a voice like a child's, saying she didn't mean for things to go so far, that it was just a party, that she didn't know. Then we'd drive home in silence, and she'd sleep until noon, and by evening, it would be back to normal. Her music thumping behind her bedroom door. My name shouted only when she wanted something. That's how these things reset. Unless you don't let them. I didn't call back. At 10:26, another number. Then at 10:51, my son, Paul. The last time he'd called was in July, when he needed help with a tax issue he couldn't tell his wife about. Before that, Christmas, barely 5 minutes, mostly asking if I'd be sending money for Bella's books. I'd sent $400, no thank you note. "Mom," he said, not even waiting for me to say hello. "What the hell is going on?" "Good morning, Paul." "I just got a call from Bella. She said she spent the night in jail." "She spent the night at the station. There's a difference." "What happened?" "She said you called the cops on her." "No, the neighbors did. I just didn't lie for her." Silence. "She's 19, for God's sake. You really couldn't handle this another way? She said she asked you to help." "She did, and I said no." "Unbelievable." "Paul," I said, calm but firm, "did you know she was throwing parties here?" "What?" "No. She said she had strangers in my house, drunk, loud, possibly worse. There were drugs, Paul." Another pause. I could hear him breathing, faster now. "She said it wasn't hers." "Maybe it wasn't, but she lied. Again. And this time, I'm not pretending it's fine." His voice turned cold. "You could have ruined her life." I almost laughed. "I didn't ruin anything. I cleaned up after her. Again. I took responsibility. Again. What I didn't do, for the first time, was make myself small to protect someone who doesn't respect me." "That's not fair," he snapped. "No," I said quietly. "It's not. None of it has been." He hung up. I stood for a long moment, phone still in hand, then placed it back on the receiver. I didn't shake. I didn't cry. It was like my body had already done enough of that for one lifetime. By noon, the texts had started. "Bella, Grandma, I'm sorry, please let me come back." Then, "I have nowhere to go." Then, "You don't care if I end up on the street?" I put the phone on silent. The truth was, I did care. I always had. But caring had become a leash, and every time I'd pulled it tight, to protect, to warn, to love, they'd only learned to pull harder. Until I couldn't breathe. I made a sandwich, half a pear, and ate slowly in the sunroom. No TV, no noise. Just the ticking of the old kitchen clock and the soft sound of birds in the yard. Around 2, I opened the closet by the stairs. It's where I kept old linens, wrapping paper, a dusty vacuum I hadn't used since the new one arrived. But further back, behind a stack of towels, was the little fireproof box where I stored everything important. Documents, bank papers, a copy of my will, a list of who got what. I brought it to the table and opened it. The will hadn't been updated in 6 years. Back then, Bella had just graduated high school, and Paul still came over for Sunday dinners twice a month. Back then, I thought we were still a family. I sat down and read through it all. 3 hours later, I called my lawyer, made an appointment for Monday. Then I called my bank. "Hi, this is Nora Millard. I'd like to set up a meeting to review some authorizations. And I'd also like to create a separate account in my name only, no co-signers." The woman on the line, young, maybe 25, asked, "Do you want to close the existing joint accounts?" "Eventually," I said. "But for now, just make sure no one can access anything I don't approve. I'll be in Monday morning to sign whatever's needed." I hung up, folded the will, put everything back in the box. And for the first time since Bella moved in, I locked my front door from the inside. I expected her to show up that evening, maybe with tears, maybe with shouting, but she didn't. Instead, I got a visit from someone else. Just after 6, the doorbell rang. I was in the kitchen, drying dishes. I moved slowly. Not because I was afraid, but because I already knew. Some things announce themselves before they happen. The air gets heavier. Your hands go colder. When I opened the door, Paul stood there. He wasn't alone. Beside him was a woman I didn't recognize, maybe early 40s, in a sleek blazer and tight bun, holding a clipboard. "Mom," he said, stiff. "This is Judith Graves. She's a family advocate. We'd like to talk." I looked from him to the woman, then stepped aside. "Come in, then." They sat on the couch. I remained standing. Judith smiled, the professional kind, the one they teach you in training. "Mrs. Millard, thank you for letting us in. I understand things have been a little tense lately." "I wouldn't call it lately," I said. Paul sighed like a tired teacher. "Mom, we're not here to fight." "Then what are you here for?" Judith leaned forward slightly, hands folded. "Your granddaughter is very upset. She says she's been left without a place to stay, and that there's been a breakdown in communication. We're here to see if there's a way to resolve that." "She threw a party with drugs in my house," I said plainly. "She claims she didn't know." "She's 19, not 9. Judith nodded. "I'm not disputing your version. But from Bella's perspective, she felt you overreacted, that you embarrassed her, made her vulnerable to legal trouble." Paul spoke up again. "She could have been charged, Mom. She could have killed someone," I replied, "or lost me this house. Do you understand that?" Paul looked away. Judith made a small note on her clipboard. "I'm not evicting her. This isn't a landlord dispute. But I won't let her come back here right now." "So where is she supposed to go?" "Isn't that your concern?" I asked. "You're her father." He flushed. "I work. I travel. We don't have room." I cut him off. "You had room for all those years when I paid her tuition. When I covered her rent that time, she forgot to apply for financial aid. You had room when you needed my help, but not now." Silence. Judith cleared her throat gently. "Mrs. Millard, have you considered a mediated family discussion? Sometimes structured dialogue can help clear the air." "I've spent years structuring the silence. That's how I protected the air." She blinked. Paul stood. "I didn't come here to be insulted." "No," I said. "You came here hoping I'd go soft again, that I'd fold." I walked to the door and opened it. "If Bella wants to write me a letter, a real one, I'll read it. If she wants to take responsibility, not just cry, I'll listen. But this parade of professionals and guilt trips? No more." Judith hesitated, but stood as well. "Thank you for your time." They left. I locked the door behind them, slowly. Then I sat in the armchair by the window and watched the sky change. Later that night, the porch light flicked on. Someone had walked up the path. I stepped to the window quietly, keeping the curtain barely parted. It wasn't Bella. It was that boy. One of the ones from the party. Dark hoodie. Nervous posture. He stood there a moment, then knelt by the porch, as if checking something. I tapped the glass sharply. He flinched. Ran off. When I opened the door, I saw what he'd left. A small black object, partly hidden in the planter. A vape pen. I picked it up with a napkin and placed it in a Ziploc bag. Then I wrote a note. "Officer Daniels, found on porch, 10:37 p.m. Belongs to one of the boys from Saturday." I placed it by the front door. In case they came again. This time I would be ready. The next morning, I walked out to find my porch steps dusted with cigarette ash. They hadn't been there the night before. I sweep those steps every evening, always have. It wasn't wind or weather. Someone had come again, and not to knock. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I took the broom, swept the ash into a dustpan, and dumped it into the outside bin. Then I went back in, locked the door, and made tea. There was a numb rhythm to everything now. Open, close, measure, pour. Like muscle memory was stronger than thought. The call came at 10:02 a.m. Unknown number, again. I picked up. "Hey." Her voice was flat. Not angry, not tearful. Just flat. "So, I guess this is how it is now." "Bella, you know I didn't leave that stuff in your house, right?" "Then who did?" She didn't answer. I waited. "I'm staying with Lenny," she muttered. "It's not ideal." Lenny. A boy I'd seen once. Baggy pants, mean mouth, always chewing something. "Are you safe?" I asked. She scoffed. "What do you care?" I asked a question. "I don't know, Grandma." "Probably not. But that's kind of the point, right? You want me to suffer a little." I closed my eyes. "I want you to feel something real." For once. Silence. "Paul said you're changing your will." "I am." "You're seriously cutting us off?" I didn't answer. She laughed once, bitter. "You know, I thought you were different. I thought you were the one person who'd never give up on me." I leaned on the kitchen counter, the edge pressing into my hip. "I was the one person," I said, "until I realized I wasn't helping you. I was erasing myself so you could keep playing at being a victim." "Whatever," she snapped. "You think this makes you strong? Leaving your own granddaughter on the street?" "You're not on the street. You're with Lenny. You have a phone. You have options. You're 19, Bella, not 9. She hung up. I didn't cry. Not even a little. Instead, I opened my desk drawer, the one where I used to keep birthday cards for her, folded money, saved clippings of things she might care about. I took everything out, sat at the table, looked at the stack, the school portrait from 7th grade, a flyer from her high school play, the poem she wrote me in 3rd grade that started with, "You smell like cinnamon." I didn't throw them away. I put them in a box, taped it closed, marked it later, because maybe one day she'd come back as someone else. Around noon, a neighbor stopped by, Marlene from 2 doors down. She'd heard some police stuff happened and brought over banana bread like it was 1954. "Everything okay, Nora?" she asked gently. "I suppose that depends on what you mean by okay." Marlene didn't push, just poured us both coffee and sat at the table like she'd been doing it for years. "You always were the steady one," she said. "Even when Derek passed, you didn't blink." I looked at my hands. Maybe I should have blinked more. Maybe I'd have seen things sooner. "You're allowed to be tired," she said. "You're allowed to want peace." I didn't reply. Before she left, she touched my arm. "You did the right thing, Nora. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." That night, I slept with the porch light off, just to see what it felt like. No knocks, no music, no shadows in the yard, only the wind and me. On Monday morning, I dressed in my gray skirt and navy cardigan, the one with the small pearl buttons. Not because I wanted to look nice, but because I needed to look like a person who meant business. At exactly 9 a.m., I walked into the Somerville Bank. They still had the same plastic plants in the corners, still played that soft instrumental music that made you feel like you should whisper. A young man at the desk greeted me with a bright smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I have an appointment with Clara Jensen," I said. He checked a list, nodded, and motioned to the side door. "Right this way, Mrs. Millard." Clara had been my financial advisor for nearly 8 years. She was polite, efficient, always remembered to ask about my garden. But today, she looked slightly different, more alert, more cautious. "Mrs. Millard," she said, standing, "I got your message. Everything all right?" I'd like to review all account authorizations, and I'd like to revoke power of attorney from my son. Clara didn't flinch, but her pen paused mid-note. Of course, she said. Can I ask if there's been any incident? There's been clarity, I replied. She nodded and began pulling papers. We spent nearly an hour reviewing everything. There were 3 active accounts, 1 personal, 1 joint with Paul, and 1 college fund Bella no longer qualified for. There were also 2 automatic transfers, 1 to Paul's mortgage and 1 small monthly withdrawal labeled Bella, MISC. When were these last authorized? I asked. Clara scanned the screen. Paul's mortgage draft has been running for 4 years. Bella's started 19 months ago. It looks like it was added during a visit. I want both canceled, effective immediately. Understood. And the joint account. Close it. Transfer the remainder to my name. Of course. As I signed each document, I felt something shift inside me. Not power, exactly, but weight. Weight returning to the proper place. Clara looked up. Would you like to set up any new beneficiaries? Yes, I said, but not today. Today I'm just cleaning house. I walked out of that bank lighter, not euphoric, not triumphant, just clean. Next stop was the attorney's office. I hadn't been there since I updated my will after Derek passed. It smelled the same. Old carpet, lemon polish, and faintly of dry paper. Mrs. Millard, said Jonathan Hale, rising to greet me. It's been a while. I need to make revisions, I said, sitting down. Some names need to be removed. Some allocations changed. He opened the file slowly. Of course. And may I ask what prompted the change? My family believes I owe them everything and deserve nothing in return. I want that reflected in writing. We worked for 2 hours. I removed Paul as executor, changed Bella's portion to conditional, left a note to be read aloud only if she challenged it. Nothing cruel, just facts. Jonathan read it twice, then said softly, It's firm, but fair. Good, I said. Let it be the first time anyone said that about me. By the time I returned home, it was nearly 2. The house was quiet, and for once, it didn't feel like punishment. I made myself lunch, tuna and celery on rye, a peach from the bowl I'd almost forgotten was there. I ate in the sunroom, watching the way the light hit the floorboards just so. I thought about the years I'd spent waiting for gratitude, for a phone call, for someone to remember my birthday without prompting. And then I thought, maybe I'd been waiting for myself. After lunch, I opened the closet by the stairs and pulled out the storage bin marked Paul Taxes. I dumped it on the rug and began sorting. Receipts, scans, letters he never came back to pick up. I filled a trash bag halfway, then paused. At the very bottom was a photo, not in a frame, just loose, curled at the edges. It was from 20 years ago. Paul holding Bella on his shoulders, both of them laughing. And behind them, slightly out of focus, was me, carrying the cooler, smiling, not a centerpiece, just the one making it all happen. I looked at that version of myself and felt the deepest kind of grief. Not for what I'd lost, but for how long I'd gone unseen. I didn't tell anyone what I'd done. Not Paul, not Bella, not even Marlene, though she stopped by the next day with a jar of plum preserves and asked, gently, how things were going. I just smiled and said, fine. Because they were. Not happy, not easy, but mine. That evening, I opened the windows in the living room for the first time in weeks. The air smelled like cut grass and the neighbor's grill. Somewhere, 2 streets over, kids were playing. loud, wild voices that made me think of summers long gone, when laughter didn't feel like something I had to earn. I spent the next few days sorting things, not just papers, drawers, shelves, even the basement. Every time I picked up an object, I asked myself one question. Is this something I chose to keep, or something I never questioned? I found things I'd forgotten I owned. Derek's cufflinks, still in their velvet box. A postcard from a friend who died years ago. An old scarf Bella had once knitted for me, all crooked stitches and bright yarn, before she got bored and moved on to something else. I kept that one. Not because it was beautiful, but because it reminded me there had been a time, even a brief one, when she wanted to give, not just take. On Thursday afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Not the hesitant kind, not the angry kind, just firm, straightforward. When I opened it, I didn't expect to see her. Bella stood there with a backpack over one shoulder, her arms crossed tight. No makeup. Hair in a loose ponytail. She looked smaller. "I'm not here to fight," she said. I nodded, but didn't move. "What are you here for?" She shifted. "I wanted to see if maybe I could come in, just to talk." "Talk?" "5 minutes," she said. "Then I'll go." I stepped back, just enough for her to enter. She walked to the middle of the living room, glanced around like it had changed. Maybe it had. She didn't sit. "I know I messed up," she started. "I know you're mad." "I'm not mad," I said. "I'm done pretending it doesn't matter." She looked at the floor. "I didn't know the stuff was in that bag." "Maybe not. But you knew enough to lie." She didn't argue. "I've been thinking," she said after a pause, "about what you said, about how I act, how I take." I waited. "I guess I got used to the idea that you'd always be there, that you'd fix things, that no matter how bad it got, you'd cover for me." "And why did you think that?" She hesitated. "Because you always did." That landed harder than she meant it to. "I'm not proud of it," she said quickly. "But I guess I never thought about what that cost you." "It cost more than money." "I know." Another pause. Longer this time. "I don't expect you to let me back in," she said. "I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know I'm not staying with Lenny anymore. I'm trying to figure things out." "Where are you staying?" "Friend's place. Her mom knows I'm there. It's okay for now." I nodded. She pulled something from her bag, a small envelope, sealed. "I wrote something, a letter, like you said." I took it, but didn't open it. "I'll go now," she said, stepping back. "Thanks for letting me in." I didn't answer. When the door closed behind her, the silence came back. But it wasn't as heavy. I sat down, held the envelope in my hands for a long time. The paper was soft, slightly smudged on one edge, like she'd carried it around a while before working up the nerve. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I placed it in the drawer by my bed. Some truths can wait one more night. The next morning, I opened the letter. No ceremony. No tea or soft music or sentimental lighting. Just the edge of a fingernail, a clean tear along the fold, and the kitchen table where I'd read bills and recipes and obituaries. It wasn't long, just 3 paragraphs, handwritten in the uneven print Bella used when she was trying to be neat. "Grandma, I don't know what to say to fix this. I don't think anything I write will be enough. But I want you to know I've thought about what happened. Really thought about it. You didn't deserve what I did. You didn't deserve the way I treated you. You were the only person who kept showing up, and I acted like that meant you always would. I see now that you shouldn't have had to. I'm sorry. I'm trying to change. I don't expect you to believe that yet. I just hope that maybe one day you'll want to talk again. If not, I understand. That was it. No excuses, no drama, no lists of reasons. Just what happened and what didn't, and maybe what could. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Did it change everything? No. But it was the first thing she'd done without asking for something in return. And that mattered more than I thought it would. Later that day, I walked to the post office. The air was cooler than usual, sharp and dry, the kind of air that makes your joints complain. But I went anyway. I mailed 2 letters, one to Jonathan, my lawyer, confirming the revisions were final, and another to a local program I'd read about. Something for young women who'd aged out of foster care and were learning to live on their own. I'd decided to donate part of my estate there. It wasn't charity. It was a correction. That evening, I sat in the living room and looked around. The space felt different now, not just because it was cleaner, quieter, though it was, but because it no longer felt like I was waiting for someone to come ruin it again. It belonged to me. At dusk, the doorbell rang. I felt a flash of dread, old instincts. But when I opened the door, it wasn't Bella. It was Officer Daniels. He looked tired, like most people who work in real life do, but kind. "Evening, ma'am," he said. "I hope I'm not disturbing." "Not at all," I said, stepping aside. "Is there news?" He smiled faintly. "No, nothing urgent. Just following up. We've closed the file on the incident from earlier this month. No charges will be filed, but I wanted to let you know personally. Thank you. I also wanted to return this," he added, handing me the Ziploc bag with the vape pen I'd turned in. "Technically, we can't hold it without a name attached. We can dispose of it for you if you'd prefer." "Yes, please." He nodded, slipping it into his coat, then paused. "I see a lot of families fall apart over things like this. Some never come back from it. Others, they figure out how to move differently. Not the same, but not broken either." I didn't reply. He looked at me a moment longer, then tipped his hat. "You take care, Mrs. Millard." When he was gone, I closed the door and leaned against it. Not broken, just different. The next morning, I went out early. The grocery store was half empty, and the woman at the register smiled when she saw me. Her name was Kayla. Young. Maybe 21. Always gentle with the eggs. "Morning, Ms. Nora," she said. "Haven't seen you in a bit." "I've been busy," I replied. She glanced at the small haul in my basket. Apples, oatmeal, 1 frozen pie crust. "Company coming?" "No," I said. "Just me. I've decided to start cooking for one like it matters." She smiled. "Good for you." I walked home slowly, not because of the wait, but because the weather was nice. The trees were just starting to turn, and the wind carried that first breath of autumn, clean, honest, final. At the mailbox, there was a card. Plain white envelope. Handwritten. No stamp. I opened it right there, on the sidewalk. Inside was a small note. "I hope one day you'll let me cook for you. Love, B." I folded it, tucked it into my coat pocket, and stood there a moment, listening to the wind in the leaves. It was enough. Not everything, but enough for now. The dress didn't fit the way it used to. It hung a little looser in the shoulders, a little longer at the sleeves. My back had curved slightly over the years, and the waist wasn't where it had once sat. But I wore it anyway. Dark teal, simple cut, soft fabric. Derek had bought it for our 40th anniversary dinner. I hadn't worn it since his funeral. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the neckline. Not for beauty, just to feel, for once, like I was choosing how I entered a room. Downstairs, I'd already set the table. Not out of habit. I hadn't hosted anyone in months, but because I needed to remember what it felt like to create space. Not for guests, not for performances, just for myself. One plate, one glass, a cloth napkin. My mother used to say that how you feed yourself when you're alone is how you tell the world what you think you deserve. For a long time, I'd eaten standing at the sink. Not tonight. I boiled potatoes, baked fish, steamed carrots with fresh dill. I lit a candle. Not scented, just plain beeswax. I put a record on, the old kind with the scratches that made the music feel like it had lived a life of its own. And then I sat. The chair didn't creak the way it used to. I'd tightened the bolts last week, another small task I'd put off for years while waiting for someone stronger to do it. It turns out I'm stronger than I thought. Halfway through dinner, the phone rang. I didn't rush to it. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Hi, Grandma." Bella's voice was quiet, softer than before. I just wanted to say, "Thank you for reading the letter. I figured you had, since you didn't throw it back at me." I read it, a pause. I meant it. I know. Another pause, longer this time. "I have a job interview next week," she said. "At the co-op. Just cashier stuff. But it's something. That's good. They said I might need a reference. I won't put you down unless you're okay with it." "I am," I said. "You don't have to say yes just to be nice." "I'm not being nice," I said evenly. "I'm trusting you'll tell them the truth about yourself. That's the only reference that matters." She let out a breath. "I'd like to stop by. Not to stay. Just maybe bring you dinner. Not tonight." "No? I know. I'm here when you're ready." I hung up gently. The rest of the meal went cold, but I didn't mind. I scraped the leftovers into a container, wiped down the counter, washed each dish by hand. There was peace in that. Not joy, not celebration, but peace. Later, in the quiet, I pulled the small wooden box from the hallway closet. The one Derek built for me during our first year in the house. It still smelled faintly of cedar, and the hinges still squeaked. Inside were old letters, photographs, a lock of hair from when Paul was born, tied with blue thread. I added Bella's letter to it, tied it gently with a piece of ribbon I hadn't used in years, not as a gesture of forgiveness, but as proof, to myself, that people can change if they decide to. I closed the lid. The candle had burned halfway down. I let it finish. He didn't call first, just knocked. 2 short raps, then silence. I knew it was him. That rhythm, brisk, impatient, hadn't changed since he was a teenager. Even then, Paul never waited to be invited. He expected doors to open. I didn't move right away. I was in the sunroom, reading, and I finished the paragraph before I stood, just to remind myself I could. When I opened the door, he looked surprised, maybe because I wasn't startled, or maybe because I didn't smile. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped aside. He came in, glanced around like he was seeing the house for the first time, even though nothing had changed. Same photos, same worn rug, same faint smell of lemon oil and old wood. He didn't sit. "I don't really know where to start," he said. "That's usually a sign you don't want to say what you came here to say." He looked at me, not angry, just wary. "Bella told me about the letter, and that you're talking again." "We're not talking," I said. "She wrote." I read. He nodded slowly. "She's trying. You know that, right?" "I believe she's trying. For the first time, I actually believe it. He exhaled. Good. That means something. Did you come here to speak for her? No. I came for me. I waited. He shifted his weight, put his hands in his jacket pockets, took them out again. Mom, I'm not proud of how I handled everything. I didn't know what Bella was doing here. I didn't know it had gotten that bad. You didn't ask. I was busy. So was I. For 40 years. His jaw tightened. This isn't about old grudges. It's not a grudge, I said calmly. It's a pattern. He looked at me for a long moment. You really changed your will? Yes. And the accounts? Yes. And that's final? It's already done. He sat down, finally. Hard, like the weight of it had only now reached his legs. You know, he said, quieter, I always assumed I'd take care of things when you got older. You mean when I got quiet? When I stopped resisting? I mean when you needed help. I've needed help, Paul. You just didn't recognize it because I didn't make noise. Silence. I never thought of you as weak, he said, but I guess I thought you'd always be available, and now I'm not. No. Now you're something else. He didn't say what, and I didn't ask. He stood again, slowly. I don't want to fight with you. Neither do I. But I also don't want to pretend like we're strangers. I looked at him carefully. We're not strangers. Strangers don't hurt each other with such precision. That landed. He nodded once, then turned toward the door. But before he opened it, he paused. You know, he said without looking at me, I've been thinking about that night. The party. The mess. All of it. I said nothing. I keep wondering if I would have handled it any better at 19, and I'm not sure I would have. I was 19 when I had you, I said. He turned back. His face was tired. I know, he said. That was the first honest thing he'd said since he arrived. He left without asking for anything. Not money, not favors, not forgiveness. Just walked out like a man realizing finally that the bank was closed. I didn't cry after he left. I didn't feel triumphant either, just still. The house settled around me like a coat I'd sewn myself. Worn, but fully mine. I didn't plan to speak. Not really. I'd been called to the community board meeting as a concerned resident. Nothing more. A formal way of saying, come tell us what you saw, what you think, then go home and be quiet again. They were reviewing the growing complaints about youth parties, neighborhood disturbances, multi-generational stress factors, as one councilman called it, like we were weather systems colliding instead of people who used to eat at the same table. When my name was called, I stood. Walked to the small podium, adjusted the mic only because it was too low. I could have read from a note. I could have made it simple. But I didn't. I'm not here to talk about noise, I said, or litter, or broken bottles in the street. I'm here to talk about something harder to name. The room was quiet. Faces neutral. One woman folded her hands tighter in her lap. I want to talk about what happens when people stop seeing the person right in front of them, when they assume someone older is just a background figure, soft furniture, a locked door they can pass through when it suits them. A man on the end of the row shifted in his seat. I raised a son, I continued. I helped raise a granddaughter. I gave them food, money, shelter. I gave them silence when I should have spoken. I thought that was love. I thought letting things go was what made a family work. I looked down for a second. Not because I was ashamed, but because truth doesn't always need to be stared at head on. But letting things go can also be a way of disappearing, of saying, without saying it, that your needs don't count, that your name doesn't matter, that as long as the lights stay on and the fridge is full, no one has to ask who filled it. A murmur from the back. I kept going. I let myself be used. I let it happen because I was tired, because I was raised to endure, because women my age are taught that dignity is something you preserve quietly, not reclaim loudly. I exhaled. Let the next sentence settle before I said it. But I don't believe that anymore. Silence. Not the uncomfortable kind, the listening kind. Something happened in my house. Something that forced me to see things I'd avoided. My granddaughter brought strangers, substances, danger. And for the first time, I didn't clean it up. I didn't protect her from the consequences. I protected myself. No one moved. Even the councilman looked different now. Smaller, maybe. I'm not here to demand policy. I'm not asking for pity. I just want this said in a room where it can't be unspoken. We don't stop mattering when we get old. And our silence is not permission. I stepped back, walked to my seat, sat down. Not a single person applauded, but not because they didn't hear me. They were still absorbing it. After the meeting, a woman in her 60s, face lined, eyes soft, touched my shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, for saying it out loud. At home, I took off the cardigan I'd worn to the podium, folded it neatly, placed it in the drawer. Then I sat at the table, and for the first time in years, I said my own name, out loud, to no one but the room, just to hear it take up space again. Nora. The envelope came on a Wednesday. No return address. Just my name, typed neatly, centered. I knew what it was before I opened it. You develop a sense for these things, the texture of paper that carries decisions. Inside, one page. A formal letter from the legal office where my revised estate documents had been filed. Notice of beneficiary adjustment sent to all previously named recipients. Translation: Paul and Bella had received their copies. There was no need to call, no need to explain or defend. The silence after a decision is its own form of justice. 2 days later, the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered. Mom. His voice was calm, careful. I got the papers. I know. A pause. It was a bit stark. It was honest. Another pause. I see that now. I waited. I didn't call to fight, he said, or to talk you out of anything. I just thought I should tell you. I've started cleaning up a few things, on my end. Like what? Money stuff, the mortgage, some back taxes, things I let slide. I'm taking responsibility. The words landed quietly, not dramatic, not performative, but different. Good, I said. It's time. I don't expect anything from you. I know. But I'd still like to visit sometime, just to sit. No expectations. Maybe, I said. Not yet. He accepted that. That was the real shift. Not in what he said, but in how he accepted my no. After we hung up, I didn't feel triumphant, just steady, like a door had been closed without slamming. That weekend, I received a handwritten card in the mail. Bella's writing, messier this time. No envelope, just folded over, taped shut. Inside, got the notice. I understand. I really do. I just want you to know I'm not mad. I would have been a year ago, but I get it now. I wasn't safe to trust. I want to be again. She'd included a note from her new manager, thanking her for being on time, reliable, and helpful with difficult customers. I placed the note in my drawer. I didn't respond. Not yet. But I kept it. because sometimes people show who they are becoming in the quiet. That Monday, I had another visit. Not from family, not from the police. From a young woman named Olivia. Short hair, canvas tote, clipboard under one arm. She'd seen my name on the donor file for the transitional housing program. Wanted to thank me in person. "I know it was anonymous," she said, "but I figured it out." "You're welcome," I said. She smiled. "It makes a real difference. These girls, they don't have anyone. Not a single person, just staff. And if they mess up, that's it." "I know the feeling," I said. Olivia stayed for tea, told me about her work, the women she helped, the moments that reminded her why it mattered. As she was leaving, she paused at the door. "Can I ask what made you do it?" "Do what?" "Give. Quietly. Generously." I thought for a moment. "Because someone has to show them the consequences don't have to be cruel," I said. "They can just be true." She nodded. "That's a kind of mercy, too." After she left, I walked to the garden. The hydrangeas had gone dry. I clipped the dead blooms, left the rest. Some things you cut back not to end them, but to help them grow differently next season. This was never about punishment. It was about not disappearing. Autumn settled in like an old friend, slow, familiar, a little rough around the edges. The leaves turned quickly that year. The maple outside the sunroom burned red almost overnight, like it had been waiting for permission. I watched it each morning with my coffee, grateful for how steady something could be just by changing honestly. Inside the house, I began noticing how much space there really was. Not the square footage, the quiet. There were no more doors slamming upstairs, no music bleeding through the walls, no backpacks tossed in the hallway, no wet towels left in the guest bathroom, no smells I couldn't identify. I'd stopped checking the locks twice at night. I no longer walked on eggshells in my own kitchen, wondering if asking for something as simple as silence would make me seem difficult. This wasn't loneliness. It was clarity. I started doing things for the first time, though they weren't new. I rearranged the books in the living room, not alphabetically, but by feeling. I planted garlic in the side garden. I started walking to the bakery on Wednesdays, where the woman behind the counter had begun to remember my name. Once I saw Bella there. She didn't see me. She was outside, across the street, sweeping the sidewalk in front of the co-op. Her hair was pulled back, and she wore one of those canvas aprons with her name on a tag that looked laminated. She paused to let someone with a stroller pass, stepped back politely. That was new. I didn't wave. I didn't cross over. But I stood for a moment and watched her finish the sweep, straighten the stack of crates by the door, and head back inside. Then I turned and walked home. That evening, I pulled out the recipe tin I hadn't opened in years, not the one I kept for show, with the cards everyone expects: pies, stews, casseroles. The real one. The tin tucked behind the flour canister, with the handwritten notes, the corrections in red pen, the little slips of paper folded in 4. Inside it, I found my mother's coffee cake recipe, the one she made only when someone had come through something: a loss, a birth, a long-awaited apology. I baked it that night, not for anyone, just because I had come through something too. While it cooled, I opened the small wooden box again. I didn't take anything out, just touched the ribbon holding Bella's letter in place. I thought of the way she'd signed it. No demands, no expectations, just "Love B," as if she was hoping the rest might grow back on its own, like skin. The cake smelled like cinnamon and browned butter. I wrapped half of it in foil. set it by the door. The next morning, I took the long way to the co-op. Bella wasn't out front. A young man was instead, wiping down the sandwich board. I asked if Bella was working. He nodded. Back in 10, smoke break. I left the foil-wrapped cake on the counter. Tell her it's from her grandmother, I said. She'll know. He didn't ask questions, just nodded. I didn't wait. I walked home the same way I came. Slow, hands tucked in my coat pockets, the wind sharper now. That afternoon, the phone rang once, then twice, then stopped. No message. No text. Just the sound of a door quietly nudging open, somewhere far enough away that I could choose whether to walk through it. I didn't. Not yet. But I didn't close it either. The cake tin came back the next day. Wrapped neatly, wiped clean, no note. Just left on the porch bench like a quiet reply. I brought it inside, set it on the counter, and stood there for a while. Not because I expected anything more, but because sometimes silence has weight. And this one was different. Not absence, not punishment, just space. A space she chose to leave something in, even if only briefly. I didn't call her, didn't write back, but I kept the tin out, just in case. That weekend, I got the ladder from the garage and cleaned the gutters. It was a task I'd avoided for years, always waiting for someone younger, stronger, more practical to offer. No one ever did. So I did it myself. Gloves, bucket, old flannel shirt. The ladder creaked, but held. My knees ached, but they worked. I cleared every leaf, every bit of silt, and when I climbed back down, I felt more like myself than I had in years. Not young, just capable. Marlene passed by as I was pulling the ladder back into the garage. "Doing it yourself?" she called from the sidewalk. "Seems I always was," I replied. She smiled and kept walking. That night I slept better than I expected. The good kind of tired. The kind that comes from doing something uncomfortable and finishing it anyway. In the morning, I made oatmeal, added apples and cinnamon. Sat in the sunroom with my bowl and watched the bare trees shift in the wind. No leaves left, just shape. Bones. The truth of a thing when everything extra is gone. The doorbell rang just after noon. I didn't rush. I never do now. When I opened it, she was standing there. Bella. No backpack, no coat. Just a sweater with sleeves too long and her hands tucked in. Her hair was down, not styled, not careless. Just her. "Hi," she said. "Hi." She hesitated. "I don't want to stay long." "You can come in." She did. We sat in the living room, not across from each other, not stiff. Just two women in a quiet room with enough history between them to furnish a house. She looked around like she was seeing it for the first time. "It smells like cinnamon," she said. "I baked. Just for me." She nodded. There was no script, no apology, no declaration, just presence. She pulled something from her pocket. A key. The one I gave her 2 years ago, back when I still thought giving access was the same as giving love. "I don't think I should have this anymore," she said, setting it on the coffee table. "Not unless you decide to give it back." I looked at it. Brass. Worn. Honest. "You could have just left it." "I wanted you to see me return it," she said. That mattered. She didn't ask to stay. Didn't ask for money. Didn't ask for forgiveness. She just sat. And for the first time, I let myself really look at her. Not as a granddaughter, not as a mistake to manage, but as a girl on the edge of being someone better. She met my eyes and held them. "I don't need anything right now," she said. I'm trying to be someone who doesn't take without asking." I nodded. She stood. "I should go. You can stay for tea if you want." She paused. I'd like that. I rose, moved to the kitchen without rush, put the kettle on, found 2 mugs, no fanfare. She followed me in, quietly, and we stood there in the warmth and the silence and the sound of water starting to boil. Nothing fixed, but something started. I never gave her the key back. Not yet. It's still in the drawer by the sink, next to the twist ties and spare batteries and one of Derek's old pocket knives. Not hidden, not waiting, just there, until I know it should belong to someone again. It's not about punishment. It's about pace. Some things come back too fast and tear the skin they land on. Some things return slowly and learn how to stay. Bella comes by most Sundays now. Not every week, and not always with notice, but often enough that I've started keeping 2 clean mugs on the counter. She brings scones sometimes. Once, she brought laundry and asked if she could do it here. Not because she expected it, but because the machines at her apartment building were broken. She asked. That's what mattered. We don't talk about the party, or the station, or the years before. Instead, we talk about her job, the woman who trains her, the customer who left a tip just for being treated kindly, the first paycheck that made her cry. And we talk about other things too. My garden, the bakery, a book we both started but didn't finish. Easy things. New things. Things that don't lean too hard on the past. The past will hold its own weight. I don't have to carry it for everyone anymore. Paul hasn't come by. He calls sometimes. Short check-ins, quiet updates. He asks if I need anything, and I tell him no. He always hesitates before hanging up, like he's trying to find a way back into a room that no longer needs his permission. I don't resent him. I just don't explain myself anymore. There's power in that. Not anger, not pride, just clarity. Last week, I stood in front of the mirror and saw myself, not as a version of who I was, not as someone shrinking into the corners of her family's needs, but as a full person, wrinkled, strong, patient, whole. I wore the teal dress again, not for a funeral, not for company, just for me. Because sometimes you need to remind yourself that softness is not weakness, that age is not absence, that silence is not the same as being small. I baked another cake, not because someone had earned it, because I had. I sat in the sunroom with a slice, the late autumn light warming the window pane, the sound of crows overhead like old friends checking in. I thought of everything I hadn't said for years, all the ways I'd kept my hands busy instead of speaking. And I thought about the women like me, the ones reading this now, nodding not because they're entertained, but because they've been there. You. Yes, you. You who folded laundry with your mouth closed, who paid the bill with no name on it, who kept the peace and forgot yourself in the process. You who cried quietly in your car, then came home and made dinner for people who didn't notice. You're not invisible. You're not furniture. And you're not too late. If they forgot who you were, that doesn't mean you disappeared. If they spoke over you, that doesn't mean your voice is gone. If you let them take, it doesn't mean you have nothing left. You are allowed to change your mind, to say no, even if you never have before, to take your name back from the mouths that misused it, to become finally the person you were before they told you to soften. It's not too late. It never was. They will call you bitter, maybe. Let them. They don't know the sweetness you had to bury to survive. They will say you've changed. Say yes. Say it proudly. And then, if you have it in you, bake a cake. Not for them. For you.